I'll press it again just to make sure it's still.
Lovely. Thanks so much,
Oh,
Julie.
it's right down at the bottom of my. Ah, it has started.
Yeah,
Yes, it has started.
Fine. Thanks, Julie. Okay, well, good morning, everyone. Welcome. We've got 3 guests joining us for a presentation about patient stories. So Melissa James, Samantha McIndoe, and Syed Alamad. I hope I pronounced that correct. Ali Mahmoud. So welcome to all of you. We'll be hearing from you in a minute. But before that, apologies for absence, Julie.
Mahmouda.
Mahmouda, okay. Declarations of any other business for the agenda? Declarations of any interest in the register or agenda items? Okay, minutes of the last meeting held on the 11th of May, 5.1. Any corrections, please? Okay, and the action log and matters arising is at 5.2. I think everything's either done or in hand or not yet due, unless anyone can find anything. Okay, well, let's get on to an interesting part of the agenda then. 3 patient stories. Debbie, are you going to do an introduction?
Help if I got off mute, wouldn't it? Really, just to say that Sam, Said and Melissa are just going to showcase 3 examples of how community nursing has adapted to provide some clinic-based services to meet demand, and they've got some good patient feedback within it as well. So all 3 working in the west of Berkshire, and I'm going to hand over to Sam, who I think is kicking off.
Yes, Sam. Thank you very much. I'm just going to show the presentation. Just bear with me one moment while I share my screen. Can everyone see that?
Yeah, fine, thank you.
Perfect. I'm just going to pop it onto slideshow. Perfect. So I'm Samantha McIndoe. I'm the Community Nursing Services Team Manager for Reading District Nurses, and today we're here just to talk through some roles and some innovations that we've done in West Berkshire. So the complexity in the community is growing, with the ever-increasing demands and skills required and the lack of services available in primary care to meet the needs in the community. The question is, where there is gaps in services, the district nurses tend to be the ones that come forward and provide that care. District nurses are seen as generalists, jack of all trades, masters of caring for patients in their own homes. We are improving the signposting to more appropriate services, but the question does remain, who takes on the patients where the care provision isn't there and it's not the role of the district nurses? The evidence is ever growing for the need for collaborative working so we can ensure that we're able to identify and implement care provision, ensuring that the adequate services are there to meet the complex needs in the community setting. Due to this, we've had to be innovative with the resources we currently have, and here are a few stories about the catheter clinic in Wokingham, our IV therapy service across including Newbury, and the wound care specialist roles developed in Reading Community Nursing Service, and the impact of them on our service, but also on our patients. There's just a little bit of data here. I do like data, and it just shows actually with our PIC clinics, how many appointments we're seeing across the West a month. And there's a peak in March 21 of coming up to nearly 700 appointments. If these services such as our PIC clinics weren't in place, that care would need to be provided in the patient's own home by the district nursing service, and that's a huge proportion. We also have general kind of the wounds across the localities. So July 20, we saw 1,730 patients in their own home for wound care, and that's roughly kind of the numbers that we're seeing every month, along with the Wokingham Catheter Clinic. So I'm going to first of all start with presenting Newbury. So the IV therapy service, the high-tech team, we look at patients who have things such as PICC lines. So it's a specialist IV nurse-led clinic supported by our triage with referrals, supported by our district nurses as well with providing the care in the clinic setting. So why do we need this service? We need it to ensure our workforce remain both the skills in the clinic and in the community setting. Clinics are not cancelled due to sickness or annual leave, so we're having to distribute our resources across the community nursing service to ensure that they do continue functioning. The specialist skills are shared. It's not down to just one individual running the clinic, it's skill set across the service. Patients can be seen either at home or in a clinic setting, and patients will receive the same treatment regardless of their location. So it's about the continuity and consistency. Patient's journey in our PICC line clinic. So we have a 52-year-old lady who was referred to our service following a diagnosis of breast cancer. The patient had a PICC line inserted at the acute setting at RBH. This was to enable her to have her regular chemotherapy and to facilitate blood tests when required. This means we don't have to use continuous needles and invasive procedures. The patient was living in Thatcham and initially was seen in Reading at the RBH, but this was a 30-mile round trip for the patient. And with all the issues associated with parking and waiting times at an acute hospital, it wasn't the best place for her care. She was referred to the district nursing team in West Berkshire Community Hospital, which is only 1.5 miles away from her home. And this was for weekly maintenance of her PICC line and pre-chemotherapy bloods when required. On receiving the referral via our triage, the clinic staff contacted the patient to explain about the clinic and what was to be expected, talking about the protocols with regards to the COVID climate, looking at things such as a timed appointment, directions, how to park, even simple things that are sent ahead of time to the patient to actually give them a bit more information and hopefully make them feel more at ease about their care and it being a less daunting experience. The district nursing high-tech team liaise with the RBH frequently, attending MDTs to discuss the plan of care for the patient, to optimise the MDT working, arranging for the patient to be seen in the community for a chemotherapy, as well as the maintenance. So rather than going to the RBH for a chemotherapy once a week, she was also having that at the West Berkshire Community Hospital. We also liaise with the district nursing colleagues to accommodate this lady's care. She requires chemo disconnection at home at a specified time. So again, a referral will come from the hospital to the district nursing triage, informing us that the patient has had her chemotherapy connection and that we would need to be going on Saturday at 10 AM to disconnect that. Again, we go to the patient's home at this point. We do experience that patients, especially during their chemotherapy cycle, may not be feeling very well, and we want to provide the care in the most appropriate setting. So staff from different teams liaise continuously over the issues identified for any patient and where necessary signpost to other relevant services, such as to Rider for ongoing support and counselling through the cancer diagnosis. The patient receives all treatment as close to her home as possible and is seen in the clinic by the most appropriate staff. This allows continuity to build that patient trust. The patient will be seen until the end of her prescribed treatment and will be given contact details for the district nursing teams to enable her to seek further advice if required. So with this patient's journey, we're looking at the being local to the patient's home. We have clinics in both Newbury, Wokingham and in Reading. We're looking at the holistic care for that patient and for the family during what can be a difficult time. But it's all about that wider teamwork. It's not just the community nursing service or our IV team or our clinic. It's about working together. And we've looked at the journey from start to the completion. So some of the feedback, we went to the patients in our clinic and kind of asked their feedback on their experience. And a few words: brilliant, just wonderful, sent parking instructions, which I think is really important for them, pleasant staff, great being local. Some appointments had to drive to Bracknell previously. Minimal waiting times, very professional service at all clinics and the homes, and the same service from most nurses. So that's our PICC line clinics. So looking at Reading Community Nursing Service, and we're going to be focusing on the wound care nurses for us and the specialist role and the impact on one specific patient. So we developed the wound care nurse role in 2019, and this is actually from a published article by our wound care nurse at the time. So we have a 29-year-old male with no previous medical history, who usually has an active and independent lifestyle. The patient presented with a wound to his inner gluteal region. Typically, these wounds can be a serious challenge for healthcare professionals. Since the initial surgical treatment for this pyonidal sinus, the patient had been treated both with conservative dressings and further surgical interventions, and had left the patient with an unhealed wound for nearly 3 years. Having been treated for many years, this was a hard-to-heal wound, impacting on the patient financially, emotionally, and mentally, with concerns for his health and well-being. Following a third failed surgical intervention, the patient was referred to the district nurses for daily wound care and was reviewed by our specialist wound care nurse. The treatment plan that was implemented, which we go in, all of our nurses, and do a holistic assessment, looking at all the history, the patient socially, emotionally, mentally, and physically. And the treatment that was implemented is what we call a negative pressure dressing. This was introduced by our wound care nurse following the final surgical intervention. The treatment plan resulted in reduced dressing frequency from daily to twice a week. This enabled him to return to work and re-establish a financial income. So rather than having to wait at home for the district nurses every day between 8:30 and 4:30, actually he was able to go back to work 3 days a week, and we visited him on a Monday and a Thursday. The treatment plan resulted in a wound size reduction of 94%, and at the end of the treatment, there was complete wound closure was achieved. The patient experienced decrease in pain levels, increased comfort, and improvement in his mental health. Also, we're looking at the health, economics, and resource outcome. The impact of this plan of care was also positive for the healthcare providers, especially the district nursing team. Going from daily care to twice a week really did reduce the visits that we were having to achieve and allowed us to see more patients appropriate on our caseload. Additionally, the complete closure of the wound prevented the potential need for additional costly surgical procedures being undertaken, and that could have further impacted the healthcare resources and costs. Since January 17, the patient has been visiting his local GP surgery. And this was every other day to either have the wound packed and dressed, where they had tried a number of different treatments, including gauze, patches, honey, silver nitrate, to which they were used to no avail. From meeting the wound care nurse in November 19, it was clear to see that she had experience with similar wounds in the past and seemed confident that she could assist with the healing process. At the time, he was dubious, heard that multiple times, but through the consistent care and the determination and the use of the VAC and the Pico dressings, the wound that he'd had for 3 years eventually closed in February 20. So actually a matter of 3 months, and he's very happy to say that it's still closed. He did write a letter. He gave permission for the article to be published, and he said, "I cannot thank the wound care nurse enough, as during the years with this wound, I've struggled to sit or even lie down at times, cancelled trips, holidays and work commitments, but most of all, I haven't been able to do things with my 2-year-old son, which I'm now able to do." Hopefully this testimony goes a little way to show my gratitude and many thanks for giving me a better quality of life. And we have 2 wound care nurses in Reading now, and that extra training, knowledge to support the district nurses with things like training and these more complex wounds really does have a positive impact on the patient journey, resulting in better wound healing and a good experience overall. Now what I'm going to do is pass over to Wokingham for their catheter clinic. Mel, if you want to just let me know when you'd like me to move on to the next slide.
No problem, thanks. So good morning, my name is Melissa. I am a District Nursing Team Lead and Clinical Development Lead for Wokingham Community Nursing Service, and I'd like to speak to you about the catheter clinic, which is run once a week from Wokingham Hospital. Next slide, please. So I'd like to take you through a patient journey. The patient's name is Beverly. She's 52 years young, very jovial and very friendly, and she's been quite anxious about her catheter changes throughout the years. Her personal circumstances, so Beverly is married, she lives with her spouse, She has grown-up children and grandchildren, and most recently she's been quite excited because she's got one on the way. She's very much into her cats and dogs, and she's independently mobile with a wheelchair frame and a mobility scooter. So Beverly's past medical history involves her having spina bifida, which has caused nerve damage to her legs, weakness to her legs, and also bladder and bowel problems. She's also had compartment syndrome, type 2 diabetes, which has become, she's become insulin dependent as of 2018. She has osteoarthritis. She was quite obese with a BMI of over 45, but she'd had bariatric surgery, which was quite successful, and she suffered with hyperlipidemia. So she's had her catheter for quite a long time, since 2011, and ever since she's had it put in, it's been problematic. So she suffers with the catheter sticking to her bladder wall, which makes the changes very painful. And as a result of this, she was having her catheter changes done in the acute using Entonox to control her pain. However, the nurse that was doing that for her had retired, which meant that Beverly was reassessed by the RAT team and deemed safe for change in the community. Next slide, please. So I'd like to take you through Beverly's journey. So Beverly was referred to the clinic on the 20th of May 2020. Next clip, please. She came to us on the 13th of July, during which we carried out her first visit assessment. So during that visit, we obtained Beverly's sort of past medical history. We gave her all of the information about the clinic, how the service runs, contact details, and we issue all of our patients with a catheter passport. This has quite a lot of information in the front about managing your catheter, but also has a record of all changes. She had been previously being seen 8 weekly for catheter changes at home. But as I said to you, these changes were quite difficult and very painful and often resulted in her bleeding. Next clip, please. So during her time at the catheter clinic, we put together quite a good plan for her to try and eliminate some of the obstacles and issues that she was having around the pain. So that involved Beverly seeking advice from urology, because we felt that, we'd take some expert advice on if there's anything else that we can be doing for her. When she comes in, we tend to use a calming technique. So I'll play spa music just to relax her. I have a technique that I use with the lidocaine gel. So I'll just leave it for quite a while to actually numb the area, and also manipulate the catheter so that when I take it out, it's not so stuck to the bladder wall. With all of these things that we put in place, the care plan was totally discussed with Beverly and she agreed to everything. And then we also reduced the time between the changes. So rather than leaving it for 8 weeks, we'd do it every 4 weeks, hoping to increase back up to 8 weekly, depending on her pain and experience. So yeah, there's been all positive outcomes for Beverly since we've changed her treatment plan. Next clip, please. So there's been no further hospital admission due to her catheter, whereas previously she'd had to go in, as I mentioned, to have Entonox for changes because it wasn't really working out at home. She's had no further home visits between the changes, so she's not had to call us out in between for emergencies. She now feels quite able to manage her condition. She has been reviewed by urology as an outpatient and is looking forward to the birth of her new grandchild. She did have some bereavement during the COVID period, so her grandchild is actually, very positive for her at the moment. Next clip, please. She's built rapport with the staff. Next clip, please. And despite having more frequent catheter changes, she now has a better quality of life and reduced anxiety and trauma. Next slide, please. So this is just some of the feedback that she gave me and some of the other patients have given me. So they quite like the catheter clinic because we have knowledgeable staff. Beverly particularly expressed that she was happy that she could choose her appointments, as she stated that she's not a morning person. The patients quite often like the fact that there's continuity of care, so they're seeing the same practitioners. They're able to get advice. We have a connection with the acute, so we can also link in with urology if needed. They say that we're kind and caring, and they would recommend us to their friends and family, and we treat them with dignity and respect. Next slide, please. So just to list some of the benefits for the service for VA patients. Obviously, we have the reduced need for home visits. We're able to see all ambulant patients as long as they can get onto a couch. We can use the clinic to upskill staff and help them to gain their competencies. With the reduced need for home visits, there is a financial benefit, as mentioned by Sam previously. We are able to work with the continence service quite closely because they're also in Wokingham. We're able to care for patients with emergencies depending on capacity. So sometimes I will try to fit another patient in during the clinic. We're able to provide safe care. It all fits in with the True North goals for the Trust. We have expert staff on the catheter management and maintenance, which reduces the need for urgent visits. I tried to create an ambient atmosphere so we can calm the patients and have them nice and relaxed for the change. And the clinical setting, obviously we hold the clinic in Wokingham Hospital, which means that we can control the atmosphere, and we're all wearing our PPE and making sure that we're taking our safety measures in light of the COVID pandemic. Next slide, please. So what's next for our clinic? I need to develop a standard of work. I have been assisting with the development of a questionnaire for specific feedback on service provision. We'll continually, improve the service and try to streamline it. And I think the clinic also offers the opportunity for us to get involved with research and contribute to evidence-based practice. And that's everything. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. You there, Sam?
Yes, I am. Thank you. And thank you for listening to our stories. Does anyone have any questions for us about any of the services we provide or anything?
Could I just ask, I'm sure my colleagues will, but just ask about the, this is a much more personalised sort of care, isn't it? That and out in the community, what lessons do you think we should learn as a trust across the, not just your own areas, but wider areas based on what you've learnt, and Melissa and your colleagues?
I think we need to be sharing the development that we're doing across the services. We've definitely improved in the West community with the innovation of the projects, and actually such as things like the catheter clinic with Wokingham. We have looked at that in Reading, but also sharing it with the East and looking at all the services and how we can develop these services and the clinics across.
Thanks. I think we got some questions. Aileen.
Yeah, hi, both of you. Thank you very much for your chat. I am a regular visitor to the catheter clinic, not for me, but for my father. I take him there to do his catheter changes. And I have to say, the service we've had there is really, really good. Makes you feel very relaxed. It has all the benefits that you pointed out. We don't have to go into Royal Berks. So I just wanted to kind of say, thank you for the treatment that you're giving. I've had personal experience of that. One question I do have is, he receives all of his packs at home, which means he has a whole load of stuff that arrives through the post. Yes. Is there not a more efficient way we could do that? Because he ends up having stuff that he doesn't need, but he can't take it to the hospital. So in effect, it's waste. And I'm talking about gloves and wipes and things like that.
I think what we need to do is possibly liaise with the continence service, because they tend to send out a lot of sort of extras that you don't need. So like you said, they send out bags, wipes. I think if they're coming to the clinic, they literally just need the things that we would need to change the catheter at home. We try to make sure that the patient always has at least 2 sets of everything, and that's in case they have problems in between the catheter clinic and we need to visit them at home. So they do need to have things at home in case of emergency, but I think we could reduce some of the amount of things that the continence service are sending. So that's something I can take forward and discuss with them.
Yeah, but overall, it's a great service. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Chris and then Naomi.
Thanks, and thanks, Samantha. I have to say I'm a big fan of this, or this and this sort of type of thing, and I think that this sort of thing needs to be a real top priority for the ICS to make sure that we have this sort of care. And in fact, David and I, before the meeting started, were discussing, should we say, what I consider to be quite a significant risk to us. We weren't talking about football, actually, Martin. We were talking about this, and I was relaying to him the story of my stepfather, who lives in Langley. He's 90. He's pretty much blind. He's completely unable to walk, and he's had almost no access to primary care for the last 18 months. So I rang the practice manager at his practice and had a good Chris Fisher shout at them. And the next day they sent out a locum GP. He found 4, I basically said this guy needs an MOT. I don't know exactly, exactly what, but his quality of life is extremely poor. So they found 4 things when they came out the next day. One was a referral to us for a physio assessment to at least make it so he was physically able to get around and go to his toilet, and we handled that brilliantly. It was all done within a week. The first appointments were held. The second one was a skin cancer. Frimley Park Hospital were on the case within 2 days, and everything is sort of moving along at the sort of pace that I was expecting. The other 2 were much more, if you like, sticky. They were sort of issues that were at the edge of primary care's involvement. A month on, nothing had happened, so I had another good shout, and the response I got was, well, district nursing are really very busy. You can't expect. Now, some of the things, should say, it never occurred to me that a PSA test for someone who 5 years ago had prostate cancer and is now experiencing very similar symptoms. It never occurred to me that was a district nursing issue. Why would I think that? And I got very much that, at the moment we can't come out. And I know it's not the same with all GP practices. And the conversation that David and I were having were sort of pretty much if we're the sort of the glue in the system here, if various bits of the around us aren't working as well as they used to, then it's hard to define exactly how wide our services need to be, because basically you're a sponge absorbing everything else that's going on in the system. And it just occurred to me that that if ICSs aren't going to pick this up as priority number 1, then they're kind of missing a trick.
Okay, Naomi.
Thank you, Sam and Melissa. I really appreciate the presentation, not least because you both spoke so powerfully about something that I think is at the very heart of the trust, which is providing really high quality care tailored to the individual. And I think that's a value that we hold on to quite rightly very tightly, and it is is one of our brand values, if you will. One of the questions I have for you both is actually around the interface you have with the voluntary sector. So, because I think, Sam, actually unless I misheard you, I think you actually mentioned Sue Ryder, for example, and Macmillan, very big contributor to the cancer sector. And I think, Melissa, unless you're going to correct me, I think Marie Curie, for example, are a force for good in catheter care. So can one or both of you just give us a bit of insight into what that interface looks like, in terms of the practicalities? Do you liaise directly with individuals in the voluntary sector? Just give us an idea of what that looks and feels like to you.
Happy to do that. We use Sue Ryder as the example. So our Sue Ryder service covers all of the West locality, so Wokingham, West Berks and Reading. We have allocated specialist community Sue Ryder nurses who support, then broken down into PCNs or GPs, and we have a really good working relationship with them. We have regular and Reading MZTs. We can contact them at weekends in emergencies, and there really has been an improvement, I'd say, especially during COVID, even for providing that care for the patients in their own home, and more timely, especially when they're complex, which we are seeing. We're able to pull on the Sue Ryder clinicians immediately for that support for us, but also for the patient. Only downside I would say at the moment is the closure of the Sue Ryder beds in Reading. That has had a huge impact on Reading District Nursing Service, and I think it probably will impact Wokingham and West Berkshire as well, because those complex patients that we were struggling to manage safely, who needed more 24-hour care, they have nowhere to go, and we're having to provide that care in the home, which is a challenge when we're unable to control their pain, etc. But we are working with Sue Ryder to identify these patients early, and working more closely to try and provide that high quality care for the patient in their home.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Julian. Then we have to move on.
Yeah, thanks Mel, thanks Sam, it was a great presentation, really good. Just on that note, Naomi, actually Sue Ryder have got at their top end of their stuff they do, they've got severe staff shortages, hence the closure of the beds. So it's you know, the staff shortages are not confined to the NHS, the specialist nurses are short everywhere. So the point you make, Naomi, is a well-made one, because you've got to work in partnership. There's no point in competing with the same. So the way we think about workforce planning is really important. Mel, question for you. I was really pleased you referenced some QI terminology there when you're talking about the sort of clinic, and you said you've got a task to do, which is about creating some standard work. Can you just bring that to life for us about what you're thinking that might do for the clinic?
Sure. It's just that I do roster in other members of staff. So at the moment I'm covering it just due to staff shortages, but I usually would roster in other members of staff. And what I would like is for the service to be providing the same standard to every patient. At the moment, unless I'm there to sort of explain every little thing about the clinic, they might be getting slightly different treatments from each individual. So I would just like to streamline it in a way that whoever comes in to run the clinic, they're all doing it exactly the same. So that's what the standard of work is about. I think I need that standardization.
Thanks, Mel. Brilliant, thank you.
Okay, well, Sam, Melissa, I don't have sides on the call, but thank you all very much for all you're doing. Most interesting and impressive. Really good stuff. So thank you very much. And I'm sure we could talk for much longer, but I'm afraid we've got lots of other boring stuff to do now. So but thanks so much. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, well, that was lovely hearing that. Now on to the rest of the agenda, if we may. 6.1, Freedom to Speak Up Guardians Report. Mike Crosati is with us. Welcome, Mike. And Mark Day is with us. So, Mike, shall I hand over to you and take us through the papers and what you want us to look at?
Yes. Good morning, everyone. So I'm going to present some of the work that's been going on in the last 6 months, so from December to July. But the data in the paper, I thought it'd be useful for you to see the full number of cases and analysis for all of the last financial year, so not just the last 2 quarters of the year. I'll take it that you are acquainted with the background and role of the Freedom to Speak Up Guardian, as you did a review at last month's board. So I will go on to probably some of the most important work, which is the proactive work that goes on around freedom to speak up. So there's been a very active communications plan the last 6 months. I've been fully involved with all of the staff networks. I'm a member of various groups, steering groups within the organisation, to try and promote that change in culture, which freedom to speak up is all about. It's not just having someone independent that people can come and speak to. It's a joint effort with the organisation to promote the change in culture, so that people are enabled to speak up more freely, ideally to their line managers. Outside of the organisation, I've been very active within the region. I'm currently chair of the western half of the southeast region, and that's quite a large group, including primary care and private providers, and it's a very good peer-to-peer network, and enables us to bounce ideas and initiatives off each other for the betterment of all concerned. In terms of the data I'm presenting there, this is the data that is submitted to the National Guardian's Office, the national body that has overall control for freedom to speak up, and the subcategories there are what they are looking for. So for the last financial year, there were a total of 49 cases submitted, and that is an increase of 18 cases over the previous financial year. So there's been a steady rise in the last 4 years in the number of cases raised through freedom to speak up, and I think that is because there is a better understanding of freedom to speak up and what it embodies. I think I'm probably out there a bit more and promoting the service, and that in turn results in people coming and raising concerns with me. David, you have your hand up.
It can wait. It can wait.
Okay, fine. So yes, total of 49 cases last financial year. I've just done the figures for the first quarter of this year. It's pretty much on a par. 11 cases submitted to the National Guardian's Office, of which 9 involve some element of bullying and harassment. As you'll see from the pie chart, the vast majority of cases that I get to hear about are around relationships, what I call the staff experience. Yet again, there have been no patient safety concerns raised to me throughout the whole of the last financial year. And to reassure you that that doesn't mean that there are no patient safety concerns raised within the organisation. It's just that it goes via other routes and doesn't come through to myself as Guardian. So the vast majority of the concerns I deal with are around relationships, as I said. Other areas might be things like potential fraud or illegal practices or whatever, but I don't really get that. It's as I said, more around how staff interact with one another. The vast majority of the concerns come from what the NGO term workers. So that is essentially anyone that isn't a manager. There's an error actually on that paper. There wasn't a senior leader that came to me. It was that's just an error. It was another manager. So a number of managers would have been 7 and 42 workers. And in terms of professional groups, most of it is AHPs or nursing staff that will come to me. This fits very much into a similar pattern for the last probably 18 months in terms of the types of concerns, who they come from, and the fact that most of it is bullying, harassment. The only thing I suppose that has changed in the last 6 months is that I'm in this last 6 months, I've had very few concerns raised via any of the networks or any of the staff groups associated with the network. So BAME issues or concerns raised by BAME staff, I've had significantly less of those than in the previous 6 months. And I don't necessarily see that as a good thing. I think there's a lot of work to be done there, and work that is going on in terms of ensuring that those staff groups feel comfortable either raising issues with myself or via the networks or line managers. So that's something that I feel that the organisation and myself should be concentrating on within the next 6 months or year or so. In terms of the impact of COVID, really it hasn't impacted, I feel, on the work I do or the concerns that have come to me. I've had very few concerns directly related to COVID. Maybe at the beginning, a year or so ago, there were a few concerns around PPE or changes in legislation that were difficult to disseminate to staff, because they were coming through very much at the last moment. But this last 6 months, really, it's sort of been business as usual as possible. Obviously, some of the face-to-face stuff, the team meetings, etc., have had to be done in a different way. But I feel that the message has got out there, and in fact, in terms of listening to people, using Teams is probably easier than it used to be pre-COVID, in that I would have to disappear off to a coffee shop with someone after work in a noisy environment and try and listen to their concern or whatever they had to say in there. So in that respect, that was one positive. Learning and improvement. The National Guardian's Office has produced 2 out of 3 e-learning packages that are on our Nexus e-learning platform, Totara. The first 2 are titled Speak Up and Listen Up. Speak Up is core training for all staff. It's not mandatory training. We are looking at how that is best disseminated to staff. I know that there's an awful lot of training that goes on. The second package is entitled Listen Up, and that is essentially for managers, how managers can raise awareness, how we can make them aware of the barriers that can exist when people wish to speak up. The whole intention is that managers should be there to listen to concerns raised by staff, not just serious concerns that might come to me, but any improvements, anything they see that could be done better, that change in culture. And then ultimately, there will be a third package which will be aimed at yourselves, senior management, and that is around follow-up, ensuring that the organisation acts on concerns and that there is feedback to both managers and staff, that there is a positive culture around talking about things and how to suggest improvements around raising concerns. But that, I think, will be out probably the end of this year. To my mind, I think the NGO, the National Guardian's Office, got it the wrong way around. Perhaps it should have been the leadership package that came out first and then the management package, but there we go. Freedom Speak Up Index report. So every year the National Guardian's Office produce a report on how effective speaking up or listening up is within an organisation. So it's not looking specifically at the work of the Guardian or the Freedom Speak Up. It is speaking up in general within the organisation, and this has been going for 3 years now, and it's looking at some of the questions within the NHS staff survey that relate to reporting of errors, raising concerns around clinical practice, and then this year for the first time there is a more generic question that is less clinical in nature, and starting to review how trusts score against the responses from staff to those 4 questions. So we have not only improved in terms of our score over the last 3 years from 82% up to 84.3%, but we have also done a lot better in terms of ranking. So 3 years ago, nationally, we were 28th in terms of score, and this last year we were 13th. So we just missed the top 10, and it would be very pleasing to see us within the top 10 next year and keep that that upward trend of both score and ranking against our peers. In terms of the extra question, we are well above the national average in terms of our score, and we came 11th nationally. And there's no comparison on previous years because that's obviously the first year that we have done that. I've outlined how we compare to our colleagues within Bob and Frimley ICSs, and I think there's quite a clear link to score and CQC rating, but not just within our local area, within the Southeast region. So we scored 84.3%. We were well above the average for the region, well above the national average, and for similar trust type, the average score was 80.8, and we were 84.3%. I have also highlighted there some of the free text parts of the feedback form that I send out to staff that have raised concerns with me. So this goes out at the end of the process once I'm no longer involved, and from my point of view the case is closed. I haven't had that many completed forms this last 6 months. I'm not terribly sure why, so it wouldn't be terribly useful to give you the data, but some of the comments there give you a good indication, I think, of how staff feel about the service and some recommendations for the board to take note of what people think of what could be done. So to finish up, really, I'm asking the board to support assurance that staff safety issues are raised, to support initiatives around raising concerns for the staff experience, and all initiatives to increase the listening up culture within the organisation, and that includes minimising barriers to communication, and for the board to note and learn and consider appropriate changes. And I'm very happy to take questions now, David.
David and then Mark, and then we'll come to your conclusions for approval.
Thank you, Mike.
Sorry. Okay.
That's fine. Mike, you've gone into a lot of detail, so actually I'm probably not going to ask you a question, but just make a few reflections, if that's okay. So first, helpful, clear paper, thank you, and some really good, encouraging detail at the end around the indices and how we perform, although I do have private ambition to knock Solent off the top spot. The two things I would comment about, first is numbers. You mentioned numbers have gone up. I would have been worried if they hadn't, and that's because there's been a massive national hike with nearly 18 to 20,000 contacts a year nationally for the NHS. So for us to get 49, if anything, that sounds a rather small percentage. Having said that, and the reason that this is important to me is I remember 20, 30 years ago highlighting clinical concerns with local trusts and they're not being taken seriously at all, and how things have changed. That's what I would say, how much better this is. So my comments about the numbers, our numbers have gone up, but they still seem relatively small. But I think that's because we don't have many clinical concerns raised, and I think that is fair and legitimate. What the consequence of that is, our percentage of comments, contacts that you have, it's a very high percentage is related to, as you say, relationships, bullying, and those sort of issues. And you know, our percentage is high, but that may be partly because our clinical concerns are low. So I simply make those comments because I think they're important to note in relationship to our paper. But a lot of encouraging stuff there. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Thanks so much, Mark.
Yes, Martin, I wanted to use this opportunity because having received these reports at board for a number of years now, we have seen our position, our performance improve consistently over the years. And I think that's down to two key factors, which I really just wanted to highlight and at least record in the minutes, because I think it is noteworthy. I think the work that Mike undertakes really does stand us in good stead. I think that he takes this so diligently that it's ramped up those positions, both in terms of ranking and in terms of comparison to other trusts, and that we should recognise the great work that he's doing. But also, and partly to address the comment that David just made in terms of the relatively low number of cases coming forward, I think that this is just simply indicative of the very open style of leadership that comes from Julian and the executive team across the organisation. And that's borne out by the support that they give to Mike and this subject, and the encouragement to all staff not to just simply look towards the freedom to speak up avenue as a way of raising concerns, but to raise it on a day-to-day basis. And I think it is credit not just to Mike, but to the executive team as well, that the work that we see in this area is as good as many other trusts would hope to achieve. And I'd be keen to thank Mike for that, but also to recognise it in the minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Naomi.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. My question is about the follow-up aspect of this, which, as you've quite rightly pointed out, is absolutely pivotal to success. My thinking, and this might be something that we want to follow up on by way of an example that you might be able to bring, an anonymised example that you might be able to bring forward to the board in the future. It strikes me that poor follow-up could lead to a very perverse effect. In other words, do the exact opposite of what you're trying to achieve in terms of cultural shift. And I also think that, or I would speculate that, the complexity of follow-up would be, kind of aligned to the egregiousness of the issue. So I guess my not for now, because it would take too long to answer. It might be worthwhile if you would contemplate it, giving us an example of that at a future board or similar. Does that make sense to you, Mike?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and yes, certainly. I'd be very happy to give a fuller experience to the board. Yeah.
Thank you.
But I think in terms of follow-up, you are right. It is imperative that there is feedback at all levels, either to someone who has spoken up to me, or to senior management and the board.
Thanks so much. Thank you, Mike. I'm sure you have approval of the board for your recommendations on page 40. So thank you for those. I think what we do, Debbie, can we move on to you for the board thing? And I think we've read the paper. I think it's just focus on your key conclusions, the key actions you want the board to take, if that's all right.
Yeah, it's absolutely fine. This is just the final version, really, of the self-assessment that you all had an opportunity to review and make comment on last month. The one thing I did want to note from a minute perspective is just that our policy will be due for renewal in October, but we are waiting, have been advised to wait by the NGO until they have made a decision if they are updating their policy. Now, we might need to revisit that because Henrietta Hughes has announced that she's stepping down as the National Guardian in September, so there will be a replacement, and I don't know if that will slow some of that sort of work up or not. But at the moment, just to note that we won't renew our policy until we know what's going on there, really. And then the actions that we agreed are detailed on the front sheet, and we agreed at the last meeting in June that we would progress all those. So we have contacted the National Guardian's offices about coming to do a session for us in October. It is that is Freedom Speak Up month, so and Henrietta would have left by then, so whether we achieve the October date or it needs to be pushed back a bit, I don't know, but all of those actions that we agreed are being taken forward, and that's all I wanted to say about this, Martin.
Thank you very much. Any comments on that? Or again, I think it all sounds very sensible. I mean, I think from my point of view, looking at this, the essential thing is this confidence that staff have to raise issues and they feel comfortable, they don't feel threatened in any way. And I think we've made some great progress. As always, there's always more to do, but I think we've made some great progress. So thank you very much to Mike and Debbie and Mark, indeed, and colleagues. So it's great news. Thanks so much. And we look forward to October, whoever it is, which will take us through that. OK, if we could, I think we're now on to the annual complaints, Debbie.
Yeah, so this is the annual report, which is a requirement for the board to receive. I don't plan on going into this in any detail. You see everything in here in the quarterly patient experience report, so none of it should be any kind of a surprise. The only thing that is probably noteworthy is we have seen quite a significant reduction in our CAMHS complaints this year, although to be honest with you, it's been quite a strange year with COVID, so I'm not sure if that's reflective of reality or just where we are in terms of, you know, young people haven't been at school, people have been less willing to upset the NHS, particularly at the beginning of COVID. So I think we just need to see how things play out over the coming months, really. And I was really going to leave it at that. And I'm happy to take any questions if anyone's got any.
That's fine. Debbie, any questions? No. OK, as you said, we've seen the data going through the year. So thank you very much for that. R&D report, Minu.
Thank you, Martin. It's a fairly comprehensive report, detailed. I will not go through it. I will just try to bring out the main points and the highlights. So, 2020-21 we're talking about, the year COVID was going through a couple of surges when R&D were advised nationally to pause some of their ongoing research where it was not a risk to patients to do that, and to divert their resource for COVID-specific research. And hence our R&D department not only continued some research, which was essential to continue, paused some, which they have since restarted, but also contributed to a significant amount of COVID research based at the local acute hospital and other providers. So that has been the focus of the year. Of course, it's good to be ranked 4th out of 48 benchmark mental health community trusts for the number of research projects we recruit to, and 11th for number of individuals who get to participate in research. I mean, we've always ranked quite well in this regard. So it's not a sort of a brand new improvement. We've always been at the top. In fact, there was a research paper about research saying that we were one of the most cost-effective trusts some years ago. But I think what this report tries to bring across is a bit of refocusing on our research priorities for the coming year. Our desire to sort of focus our research more on the sort of trust level priorities, patient needs, and hence the areas of physical health in severe mental illness, self-harm, suicides, pressure ulcers, fall. So we're trying to align our research to our trust's sort of clinical priorities, safety priorities, within the constraints of what can be available through the NIHR portfolio. I think it's important for the board to understand that we are significantly dependent upon taking up NIHR portfolio studies, which are predetermined to a great extent, because the vast majority of the funding to run the research program simply comes from that source. There's a tiny amount of resource we get actually from the trust itself. So we have to do this balancing act all the time in order to do good research where not only our patients, of course, benefit from the research, but our staff also find the whole research agenda interesting. We've ended with a proposal for an R&D strategy, and there are several angles to it, and we could discuss that if the board found that interesting. But that's sort of strategy looking forward for 21-22 and how we shape our research going forward. So happy to take any questions.
Chris.
Thanks, Manu. It's a really interesting report. As you know, every year when this comes forward, I'm always straight in there with one question, and I'm obviously really annoyed at you because you've, in the way that you've improved it, has cut off my first question. The research on its own is obviously really, in and of itself is obviously a really good thing. It helps people focus on quality of the things that we do. It helps us recruit good people, and hopefully through pure research it leads to things that we can apply to our clinical care. I think my reflection on this paper, I think page 82 is great. As I say, it predicts my usual question on which of the current projects have got particular applicability to future care. I'd love to be able to understand how virtual reality for patients with psychosis works. I mean, that sounds, an utterly fascinating piece of work. I liked the section from starting on page 91, setting out the priorities over the 3-year period, and the sheer list of really interesting looking quality projects that you set out for 2021. So just a really interesting read, and well done to everybody involved in this.
Thank you, Chris. Aileen.
Yeah, similar comments to Chris, but I guess the only bit that I would add on to that is you asked the question at the end, Manu, if the board would like to hear the R&D strategy. I certainly would be interested in hearing that in a future session. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much. Julian.
Yeah, thanks. I've never asked Manu this, but I am fascinated about how we've done it. So this is the 15th or so annual research report I've seen. And although Manu says we've been reasonably near the top, actually that wasn't the case. Berkshire Healthcare was sort of distinctly kind of mid-table, bottom of the pile if you go back 10, 12 years. And the board sometimes got exercised about that, but I think we made a consistent decision, which we would see some kind of organic growth. We accepted we weren't attached to huge educational establishments like Oxford or UCL or whatever. And we would just see it sort of grow naturally. How have we got you know, we're a decade from there to where we are. I mean, without putting additional kind of significant resources or pushing it hard. What's happened?
It's a good question, Julian. I think, I mean, all I can say has been incremental improvements all along. There is a level of interest from senior leadership, a level of push that I probably have sort of implemented gently over the last sort of 5 to 6 years. But I think the last year or two, Katie Warner, as a new head of research, has brought to the trust some new thinking. I think that has allowed some of the sort of good thinking and planning to be implemented. So even though we had a research strategy, which we had developed 3 years ago, just before Katie came in, we just didn't have someone who would be able to implement that sort of research strategy. And Katie's arrival has allowed us to start sort of small steps towards implementing what we hope will be a good strategy. Of course, we expect significant change in that area to happen in the near future, but I'm hoping to keep this momentum going irrespective of the leadership in the research department.
Very good. Any other comments? Chris, did you have another one?
Well, yeah, I'm just going to offer up an answer to Julian's question. I mean, I think Minu's being, as usually, very self-effacing here. I think, you know, my observation is from someone who was doing quality visits both to clinical functions and indeed to the research team. I would say the big difference over a 5 to 6 year period, you know, notwithstanding that, you know, Katie is absolutely outstanding, is Minu's leadership here, because, you know, what I would observe inside the organisation, if you'd asked the question about research inside the organisation, you know, 6 or 7 years ago, I think that, you know, many members of staff would have perceived it to be something that someone in a white coat does somewhere in a lab somewhere that they don't know anything about. And now pretty much everybody, I think, that I'd certainly talked to sees, you know, the development of, you know, of high quality or high quality research leading to better outcomes for patients as being a core part of their job. And so, as Minu says, I think it has been small incremental steps, but it's been leadership too.
Thank you, Chris. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure, we echo that, really.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Could we move on then to your next paper, which is a medical revalidation? All sounds going well, but
thank you, Chair. So this is again 2020-21, when the national picture for appraisals, annual appraisals and revalidation looked very different from previous years or from future years. As we expect, the national medical director's recommendation was that all appraisals are paused in 2020, at least for the first 6-month period, to allow clinicians to focus on frontline care. In our trust, we took the opinion of our doctors, and we did not formally pause the appraisal, so as if doctors thought they had the time and the inclination to do it, they could do it, even though our numbers slowed down in this early part of 2020. The appraisals carried on happening in the trust. And of course, by the time we ended the year, we had caught up so that our appraisal numbers remain absolutely spot on. In fact, the only ones who could not complete an appraisal were perfectly reasonable, being on sick leave or maternity leave long term. And there was only one doctor who, in one of the community health services, could not complete their appraisal within the year, but did it within a month after that. End of March was because of workload. Probably one of the ways to look at this is COVID year has allowed, I think, a lot of the senior leadership nationally to reflect on medical appraisals, to reduce the onus and burden of doctors providing huge amounts of evidence in very complex documents, which were then sort of reviewed by appraisers, and appraisers are doctors. So, you not only are appraising others and spending time reading their document, but then you're also preparing your own larger document for someone else to read. And NHS England has implemented what they call an appraisal 2020 approach, which we expect to be the future of a slimmed down appraisal system. You need the sort of top 5 domains which the General Medical Council requires for assurance that a doctor is up to date and fit to practice. And the amount of evidence that we need to attach has significantly reduced, in not only terms of volume, but the bureaucracy of having to do it on a certain template only, etc. So it looks positive broadly, but as a trust, we've carried on using what is our medical appraisal guide, the MAG form, which is a traditional form with as much information as a doctor can put in. We've carried on with our quality assurance process of the annual medical appraisals. We have adequate number of appraisers, although we could always do with some more, and we are in the process of training some additional appraisers. And the rest of the governance process in terms of doctors continues unchanged, really, irrespective of the pandemic. So I'll pause here and happy to take any questions from the board.
David has a question.
Hi, David.
Thank you, Minu. First, I thought the report provided a very high level of assurance, so thank you. Secondly, I just want to note the very high appraisal level. I mean, essentially, as far as I can see, every doctor's been appraised, and if they haven't, it's because they're on long-term sick or there's a very legitimate practical reason. I just wish that was true across the NHS as a whole. So as a previous RO, my concerns used to be around the interfaces, and while I cannot see any weak links in this report at all, I'm just going to ask you, Minu, is whether you have any private areas of concern where you think appraisal just isn't working properly, noting that we employ doctors in the trust and around the trust as such.
Yes, I think that's a good question. I think the first important point is that the real quality evidence that appraisals do assure us that doctors are absolutely safe and fit to practice is lacking. So just because a doctor has had 5 appraisals and has had revalidation done does not mean that a doctor may not do something, make an error, or have a practice which may subsequently be proved to be less than ideal. So hence we have ongoing governance processes, so that even outside the appraisal process, we have understanding any soft concerns about doctors, discussing that and addressing those. So that's the sort of broad context of where appraisals and revalidation sit in the medical governance process. Regarding our doctors, so doctors where I am the responsible officer, so to say, so they're not just doctors employed by BHFT, because you can have GPs employed by BHFT where I'm not the responsible officer, but they have a responsible officer somewhere sitting in Oxford who is the RO, so to say, for hundreds, if not thousands of GPs. But for our own doctors, where I'm the RO, the scrutiny is quite high level. So that is a high level of assurance I have, and I hope the board has, about the RO function that I provide. Then we have doctors that we employ, contract, where the RO sits outside the organization. Example is West Call GPs who are contracted by us, sessional West Call GPs who are probably in large numbers, who work occasionally for the trust, do an on-call out of hours. They have their appraisal and revalidation systems which sit outside the trust. All I can do is request that they provide, after their annual appraisal, an appraisal output or a summary to the medical director, so to say, so that I'm assured that they are completing their annual appraisals and there are no significant concerns raised about them. But that is as much as we can do. You're probably aware appraisal documentation is considered as confidential to the doctor and the appraiser only. So GPs will not share, and I'm sure, David, in your time, you wouldn't have shared your appraisal document with another organization's medical director in its entirety. So that is about GPs. We also have some geriatricians employed by the Royal Berks, but the medical director and the RO of Royal Berks and myself have a close relationship regarding sharing any information about doctors if there were any concerns, and that has been our mechanism of managing the appraisals of those doctors who get it done at the RBH rather than with me. So in that sense, we have put in every measure that we can realistically implement to ensure that doctors do have annual appraisals, either within the organization where I'm the RO or those who are simply contracted by us. There's a small number of agency doctors who come in where the agency is the body which is responsible for managing their appraisals and revalidation. So we're happy to take a further question, David.
Well, can I, for the purposes of assurance, can I just be blunt with my question? So
Sure.
in the past, a small number of notorious doctors simply moved employment or moved trust, and the genuine serious concern attached to them didn't go with them, so they started afresh, and that was why post-shipment this was brought in. So I'm not talking about the quality of appraisal, I'm just talking about doctors who've got a history of serious problems. So I'm for the record, if there was such a doctor and they joined our trust, do you feel confident that that concern would follow them? We would know about it.
So you might be aware, David, there is a system which we all implement. It's there in the report itself, what we call the Medical Practice Information Transfer Form, the MPIT, so that whenever a doctor joins this trust, we will automatically request an MPIT from their previous RO, who then completes and sends us the MPIT if there are any concerns that the RO wishes to reveal to us. And similarly, if any of our doctors join another organization, I will always receive an MPIT request from elsewhere, which I then fill in and send over to their RO. So the system of appraisals and revalidation is no longer sort of organization specific. It is linked together. I think this problem you're talking about actually has, in a sense, I wouldn't say resolved, but managed through the MPIT process for at least the last 5 years since I have been the RO. So it is not new. Whether the MPIT process provides absolute assurance or not, it's as good as the information someone gives to me, and we can manage that. But yes, you know, there are instances still happening of doctors where their practice has subsequently been proved to be poor quality. But those are occasional, and they are actually quite historic. If you go back to some of the national cases, they probably happened 5 or 6 years ago rather than happened last year. So we have processes in place, and that is as good as we can provide assurance to the broader question you're asking. I'm assuming you're not meaning that we have rogue doctors who are going elsewhere, or we have rogue doctors who come from elsewhere, David, but you were asking a more of a national, global question, which I hope I've answered.
Okay, thanks so much, Naomi.
Thank you, Minnow. Yet another process within our trust, which is robust. Thank you for the assurance. My question is about how well the process is supported digitally. You know, we all know, don't we, that any process which has administrative burden attached to it, which this one does, even if it's skinnied down, can be helped in spades if it has a slick digital system that supports it. So can you just give us a bit of insight into that? What does it look and feel like, and can we make it better?
We absolutely can, Naomi, and maybe I probably didn't put it in the report, but we are actually in discussion with a provider to provide a digital platform for our appraisals in the trust and job planning for our doctors. And I think many of the large organizations have implemented this because the actual physical process of administering this, and you have to remember, I have a band 4 half-time administrator who manages this for me, and I do a lot of it myself, is tracking every doctor to ensure that they have completed their appraisal on time, if not to send them reminders, to collect the appraisals when they're done, to send it for quality assurance, and then finally it comes to me. And of course, when they need revalidation, I have to go to 5 of them. So, you know, she attaches 5 and sends it to me, and then I look at them. Now, a digital system makes it much easier. Of course, you know, they have a dashboard. I can just sort of quickly look through all 5 of them and do that. The one reason I'm, in a sense, thankful I did not jump into a digital system, because when the appraisal process was heating up and everybody thought that is a solution to everything in the world, digital systems became very complicated. And they put in so many fields and angles that when we asked for a demonstration 3 or 4 years ago, our doctors just could not take it. And hence we stuck to what the NHS England's recommendation was to use the MAG form, which is itself a very clunky tool. If you don't save every page as you go along, you just lose everything. So Naomi, yes, in an ideal world, and we may see this in 22, and my next year's report may touch upon this, though I won't sort of absolutely provide that level of confidence, but it's going to happen in a year or so, that we will be moving to a digital system, which is hopefully going to be slimmed down, because the national direction is very clear. Appraisals need to be slimmed down. You don't need to provide volumes of evidence just to say that you are working adequately, and a lot of sort of box ticking exercise. And the administrative process hopefully will be, so we'll have an initial painful period because we're going to put a lot of retrospective stuff onto digital systems and get everyone used to it. But for the future, it should be an investment.
Okay.
Thank you.
You've got applause there from Naomi. Okay, thank you very much, Minu, for that. Could we move on then to 6.6, Debbie? We've read the paper. I think you've got some top level points in your covering sheet, so over to you.
Yeah, I don't intend to take up lots of time here. I apologise, it's a lengthy document designed by NHSE. This is version 6 and it has grown every time they have reissued it, unfortunately. But this is the latest version published at the end of June, and the intention is that it should be presented to the board so you have sight of it. But as you say, Martin, I've put on the cover sheet the main things. What I would say is we're really mindful of PPE and guidance fatigue that is happening across the land at the moment, and our organisation is no different, and we're working really hard to ensure that staff continue to follow what they should be doing. It's been made really clear nationally and regionally to me as a Director of Infection Prevention Control and Director of Nursing, there will be no significant changes on Monday in the NHS. We will be still expected to do the 2 metre social distancing, the wearing of masks everywhere, etc. There is quite a lot of national concern about that at the moment because that's not particularly been articulated, I would say, very well in the public messaging. So we are starting to see a growing number of visitors and people coming onto our sites that are not happy to continue to be complying with that. So something we need to keep an eye on. And then the only other things, other than assuring you that I do have processes for regularly reviewing this, there are 2 specific asks in here for the board. One is around me ensuring that we have process in place for ongoing testing for staff to wear FFP3 masks, which is the enhanced masks, and we do, and we have an ongoing programme of people being tested for the UK masks, because that is what we will be receiving moving forward, not masks that we have traditionally received. And the other is a new ask, which is around lateral flow testing, and we're just working through what would be the most sensible piece of assurance to put in here. Really, it's not actually particularly straightforward to be able to provide the assurances of are everybody that should be doing lateral flow testing in a clinical face-to-face work actually doing that twice a week at the moment. So Minu and I are working through that at the moment, but they're the only two other things I wanted to just point out. And I'm happy to take any questions if anybody's got any.
Thank you. Any questions for Debbie? Aileen?
It's really that I've got concerns, I think, like you've said, Debbie, about people just not wearing masks come Monday. How are we going to cope if a member of the public walks into one of our buildings and just says, no, I'm not going to wear a mask, I don't have to wear it anymore? But, you know, what position does that put our staff in?
We're having that already, to be honest with you, Aileen, and have increasingly over the past 3 months. And, you know, we have continued and will continue to give the message that from a safety perspective, we're asking people to wear masks. It's always a bit tricky, if I'm honest, because anybody could actually say they're medically exempt.
Yeah.
So it is a message of continuing to encourage, explain why, and I think we're going to have to see, you know, other than that, what Monday brings, I think, really. But that is, it's not new. That has been probably happening increasingly since May, when some of the rules changed and people are fed up with wearing masks.
Yeah, it's a worry, isn't it?
Do we on that point, Debbie, do we on our website, etc., do we make clear what we expect of visitors?
Yes. Yeah, but I'm not sure lots of visitors or people coming to our site actually bother to look at the internet to see. And we also using a lot of social media platforms and, you know, use Twitter and Facebook and all of that as well to get messages out around visiting. And we will continue to do that moving forward from Monday. I was hoping that the Prime Minister might have been a bit more explicit that he's not changing, that the rules in healthcare aren't changing, because I think that would have helped. And I know a lot of my colleagues around the country feel the same, really, because that message just isn't really out there. But we shall see.
Okay. Any other questions? Debbie, we're happy to receive your assurance on the mask testing, and so the lateral flow testing, it sounds like there's a bit more work to do to nail that down. I think it's quite difficult, though, to give absolute assurance on that, isn't it?
Yes, Minu might want to come on here on some of the things.
Are you able just to comment on that?
Sorry, can I just have clarity on what the question is, please?
It's the lateral flow testing, confirmation about lateral flow testing.
So lateral flow testing, there's been a slight change in the national process for NHS organizations. Staff are expected now to order it themselves, but we have retained our internal reporting systems for staff to continue reporting. Now, the national figures for reporting have been 14 to 15%. We are much higher than that, but we are certainly not 100% of our staff who are reporting on lateral flow tests, even if they're doing it. We made our reporting systems as easy as possible. There are apps on the phones. It really doesn't take more than 30 seconds to do it, the reporting bit of it. We are starting a sort of a renewed push to encourage our staff, at least all our patient-facing staff, to report, to perform a lateral flow and report on it at least twice a week, so that we can keep patients and other staff safe. The issue always in these circumstances is that nationally they've said it's not mandated, and that always is a weak position. And then they leave it to local organizations that you could mandate it if you want to. Most organizations have not gone down the route of mandating lateral flow for their staff, but using a means of requesting their better judgment to do these tests. So I think that is an ongoing means we're doing. In a sense, you know, my message to staff on Thursday will be, within our organization itself, since we started using lateral flow, we have picked up 99 staff with asymptomatic infection who then self-isolated, etc. So you can imagine, it is still a useful tool to protect patients and staff. Although when you read in the national press or even the British Medical Journal, there is a huge amount of opposing views about the value of lateral flow test in epidemiological and sort of public health arenas. But that's a different matter. We are committed to continue implementing it in the organization.
So I'm just trying to get, there's a slight sort of feeling I'm picking that we're not quite sure what's on the one hand or the other. Our position is, from what you said, I understand it, that we are not mandating it, but we are wanting it to happen. And I assume there'll be some way of picking up on those staff who, materially fail to do them. I mean, I guess there's always the odd thing that might be missed, but if someone's not doing it consistently, then I would assume there'd be some feedback to that staff.
We have. So we've even set a system up of every time a member of staff does a test and reports it, the manager of the staff gets an email notification that the individual has performed a lateral flow test. So I receive from my direct reports, and Julian receives every time I do my lateral flow test. The intention is that the manager then has clarity on how many of their staff, especially clinical patient-facing staff, are doing or not doing a lateral flow. And this then leads to a conversation with the members of staff who are just not compliant, and encouraging them at a service level with their line manager, which is a better way of doing it than saying that me as medical director feels it is mandated for all of you type of thing. So I'm setting the direction, giving the argument for it, and then we have a very robust system. In fact, we are sort of reviewing our data system so that we will have detailed data about service level reporting, clinical staff, non-clinical staff, etc., through our Tableau dashboard, so that we can have an overview about how many lateral flows are being done, and managers have clarity how many of their staff are not doing it. They have it at the moment also, and it's happening. I know managers are having conversation because they've written to me saying how difficult it is and how onerous it is for them, but they're happy to do it, because of good reason.
Okay, David.
Well, I guess just to be clear, I mean, lateral flow tests are useful. They're just not they're not perfect tests. That's all there is to it. The two are not exclusive. So my iGo is a useful car. It's just not a perfect car.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Thank you very much. I guess we'll be having another discussion in the autumn about vaccination for NHS staff, which will be interesting. Okay, Quality Assurance Committee 6.7. David, can you take us through the 3 items?
Certainly. I'm not particularly going to go through what the Quality Assurance Committee did on the 1st of June, but I thought it was a good meeting. We did ask for another MSK presentation. I know it's been to the board. The reason for this is that MSK has been an issue in our part of Berkshire, for a long time, with increasing demand and long waiting lists. And I've seen a number of attempts to deal with that. So I wanted to see, go into more detail about it. And I think it is something that we as a board, the project, need to fully support. So that's all I was going to say about the QAC meeting. Learning from deaths, another excellent report. And I think the one message that came through there was that there are no deficiencies of care or COVID-related care associated with the trust. That doesn't mean that people going into the NHS generally can't get hospital-acquired COVID, but we didn't have any deficiencies of care, which is very, very assuring. And the Guardian Safe Working Report, again, it's never really an issue for us, but I view it as a very important report. And I will be writing to the 2 clinical guardians who are retiring and thanking them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for David? Some very reassuring reports. Thank you to all concerned. Can we then move on to the Quality Improvement Program update? David Townsend.
Thanks, Martin. So at the exec level, we've been reviewing the QI plan and refreshed and updated it. And as part of that, I felt that it would be helpful to give an update to the board just on where we've got to and next steps. So I provided the presentation to do that. It just takes you through really where we started, what we set out to achieve, what our system actually looks like and how we're progressing against that. And then really what we're currently working on and planning to work on going forward. A bit around the role of leadership and of boards within a sustainable and successful quality improvement system. And then a few things that we could consider as a board that may support that going forward. And it really is for discussion around whether people feel that that would be helpful or the best way to help support the system. I don't know if you want me to talk you through quickly or briefly the document I provided, Martin, or whether you want to take it as read and just open it up to questions.
I think if we could take it as read, but we're quite keen on page 240, the heading, our contribution to QI system delivery. There's some things there which I think you're recommending.
Yeah.
And I just naturally went to the one that had the word board in it. Yep. Recommendation 6, board members to complete leadership, fundamental behaviour, self-assessment. I wouldn't mind just understanding that, but do you just want to comment generally on that slide, because that seems to be your summary?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think leadership in QI systems and all of the sort of research and evidence says that it takes time, it takes commitment. It's not a simple path to choose. If you want to get the maximum benefits out of a quality improvement approach and system, then it's got to be supported by everybody, and particularly by leaders in the organisation. You've got to understand that it's a big commitment. So when we started, we had a choice to do QI or not to do QI as an approach, and we had a choice about what sort of QI system to use. And many organisations choose a project-based approach where you just use the tools. You work on projects and you can deliver benefits through that approach. One of the problems with that approach is after a bit of time, you get fatigue or you run out, or it's not sustainable after a period. So we chose our particular approach, which is organisation-wide and getting everybody at every level trained in the same set of tools, getting that alignment. But it's harder and it takes longer, but longer term, it will deliver bigger benefits. And therefore, the support of the leadership of the organisation, the exec, and particularly the board, is really key. Because if we don't feel we're getting that from it, or we don't support that type of approach, then that's one of the biggest threats to the long-term delivery and sustainability of this type of quality improvement system and approach. So we've been thinking about our next steps. We've got a plan which is on slide 237 of what we're currently working on. There's a number of sort of key priorities of things that we're working on. We've got our roadmap. And we were thinking, well, what is the role of the board? So in the past, we've done a bit of training with the board. We've sort of hosted some visits for you, but we haven't done anything for some time around quality improvement. And the suggestion when I was reviewing what role the board should have and what leadership role we should have in the programme, and looking back at the research and the evidence, I came up with these 3 things that I felt were things that were within our remit, and 6 recommendations. So all the recommendations are for us as a board. So one is about the sustainability of the whole QI system and delivery of those longer term benefits. That's the biggest threat for why these programs fail when that goes or disappears. And so in order to make sure that doesn't happen to us, my 2 recommendations are that we have a QI induction program for new board members. I think we sort of do it, but it's not formalised, and it probably could be better than it has been. And I think also we as an exec team are starting on a monthly basis our QI meetings to do bite-sized bits of training just to refresh and update our skills. And I felt that may be a benefit to board members as well. We could easily arrange some refresher training. And then the next one is to look at this alignment from board right down to the frontline teams. We're all using the same tool set, the same systems. That alignment's really important. So we've got vision metrics, we've got our True North goals, we've got a number of strategic initiatives, we've got corporate projects, we've got breakthrough projects, and doing a bit of work on aligning those. And obviously from a board point of view, the vision metrics and the True North are the two areas that we probably look at most. And then I think we're starting to have conversations, obviously, with ICSs and with our system and with our partners about our approach. There's an awful lot of interest in QI in the NHS at the moment. There's many, many more NHS trusts and organisations using this methodology or the different sorts of QI methodology. And what we're seeing at the moment from the system is what we still continue to work on in the organisation is something called overburdening, which is just the QI term for trying to tackle too much at one time and not doing it very well. So part of the QI system and methodology is to do a few things really well. So we do that by selecting a few True North metrics, not hundreds, and we do that by selecting a few strategic projects, not lots. But we're seeing massive waste and overburdening coming in from outside organisations, from the system, from all the demands being placed on us. And at times we as board members are in those meetings, and therefore this is about when we're in those meetings supporting through QI methodology and thinking, not doing what we can to help with that prioritisation from the system and from others on us, so that we can just ensure that we're working on the things that will make the biggest difference to our staff and to our patients and create the greatest value for them. And then there's the stuff around the principles, the behaviours and the tools. So part of the QI system is to train all of our leaders in a different way of leadership, in QI leadership rather than traditional NHS leadership. And so we use a similar assessment on fundamental behaviours that I showed in the previous slide. And so one thought was, well, we could offer that self-assessment to all board members if they wanted to. It's a tool that all of the exec have used and update themselves a number of times. We don't share it with one another unless we choose to. It really is about self-assessment and helping you with your own sort of leadership behaviours. And then also looking at whether Gemba visits for board members would also help embedding that learning and understanding about the QI system, seeing how it's operating across the organisation. So those are the 6 suggestions of things that we could do as a board in order to help the development and sustainability of the QI system that we're using.
David, can I just ask a couple of questions before I throw it open? This business about external overburdening, can you just give me an example? I didn't quite understand that. Because clearly we decide our own priorities and what we want to do and focus, but can you give an example of this external problem?
Yeah, I mean, like every organisation, you're trying to work out what will add value to you and what you need to liaise with partners about. And so we do that and talk to our partners about that, and they do that with us. And so does the system, and so do the local authorities, and so does everybody else. And you add all of that together, and we're in many meetings over the recent months with the development of the ICSs and looking at how we're going to work together in provider collaboratives, how we're going to work together in places, how we're going to work together across our current ICS systems. And you add all of those things together that all of those different parts of the system want to deliver, and you have a list that's 500 things long that either we're being asked to lead on or to support or contribute to, and then we have our own list as well. So all this is basically where we're in those meetings, it's having a QI thinking head on and it's no more than that. It's just basically in those conversations saying, how is this going to impact on us and our teams and what we're trying to achieve? And how can we influence other people to select a few priorities that will make the biggest difference rather than thinking they need to come up with a list of 100 things because they're not thinking in a QI way.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things is we need to raise this up. So if people are getting overburdened by all this, they need to be raised up the chain, either to Julian or to me, or whoever it is, so that we can get in there and try and help people get priorities. My big concern about a lot of this stuff is that there's lots of activity, but we need to be focusing on the outcomes we're trying to achieve. What are those big outcomes we're trying to achieve for our patients and our sustainability? And that if we keep on that, encourage people to be on that, it helps focus you know, the issue, does this really make a difference?
Yeah.
One other thing, and then we'll throw it open. Oh, I forgot what it is now. No, I'll throw it open now because I just forgot what my point was. Any other questions, Mark?
Yeah, thanks ever so much, David. And last week it was quite timely. I joined a QI meeting with Wokingham CMHT team for their huddle and witnessed a really good example of how QI is still alive and being used for very current and of the minute issues. They were talking about health and well-being working virtually, and truly impressed me in terms of the list of ideas and initiatives that they're using this methodology for. And so in your presentation, where you talked about needing to continually refresh and use induction for new starters, I would heartily endorse that, because if we don't, then as an organisation, this will slowly wither on the vine. And we've got to find a way of being able to induct all of those new employees into doing this, because in my mind, QI isn't just about what we do, it is more importantly about how we do it. And I think that the induction program and continual training and the initiatives that you've got on those 6 points there, I would endorse entirely. So no, thank you for that.
Yeah, and we're doing that in different ways at the moment, Mark. So we do refresher training for teams in QMIS because they obviously have turnover. So we do that on a weekly basis where people are just invited. They can ask for particular topics to be covered. So the team do a virtual 1 hour sort of drop-in training or question and answer session. We also, if this system was fully embedded and fully sustainable, then you wouldn't need any specific induction training, because it would be you join a team and you would just be taught by the team how they do their job. And so the team effectively just inducts somebody into their processes, their ways of working. And that's happening already with some teams as well. And then obviously we do offer new people if they're key, if they're a new team leader, if a number of people in the team have turned over, then we do bring them into, you know, the next lot of QMIS training so they can have a more thorough training in the system to take that back to their team. So yeah, it's done in a number of ways, but I don't think we have a systematic way for doing it for new board members. There is no process that we've got set up at the moment for what we would train a new board member in relating to QI.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Naomi.
Yeah, thanks, David. And I'm just going to kind of endorse Mark's comments here and just simply say, don't give up. And I know you're not. So, you know, it's just words of encouragement. My observation about QI, the systematic approach that we've decided to take here, is deeply important to us. It's strategic. I think as a performance management mechanism, it's up there with the best of them. And I also believe that at a certain moment in time, momentum takes over. So, you know, right now we may still be feeling that this is all a bit glacial. It all feels like a bit of uphill. We've got to keep applying a lot of effort in order to make it look and feel like it's an inherent part of our culture and kind of business as usual. But there is a tipping point, and that tipping point is yet to come. So, you know, just stick with it.
Yeah, it's interesting about the tipping point. You're absolutely right. And I think we just about got to the tipping point before COVID hit. So we were just over 50% of the organisation had been through the QMIS training. And then, of course, we had to put all of the training on pause and everyone got pulled into, obviously, an incredibly busy time. So they were able to continue to use the tools, but we weren't able to develop it. The QI team were redeployed. And we're now back running training and back on the roadmap again. But it's a bit like the Euros, you know, we've lost a year, really. We're 1 year behind where we would have been. So I think over the next 6 to 12 months, we'll definitely be over that tipping point, and we'll have a majority of the organisation will have been fully trained. And so within the next 18 months, we'll have the whole of the organisation will have been through, every team will have been through the QMIS training on the current projections.
Yeah, thanks. And just to you know, kind of emphasise a point that Martin was making about outcomes. Because I you know, like the rest of us, that's that's the purpose, isn't it? It's all about the outcomes. And I look to the True North Performance Scorecard and the vision metrics, because that's where we as a board find the outcomes, and then can pull into how QI is driving those outcomes. You know, it's systematic, it's controlled, and so yeah, keep going.
No, I think you're right. One of the things that we've had a discussion about is, of course, the True North metrics are only a few improvement metrics that we have visibility of. I'm so impressed by what teams are working on and by how many hundreds of small incremental improvements they're making. And of course, we don't see those because we don't capture them. And we did talk about capturing them. How do we get visibility of all of the benefits that this program is delivering? But actually us collecting all of that data off teams is not adding value to our staff or to our patients. It might be nice to know how many improvement tickets they've done. It might be nice to see the totality of everything that's done all in one place. But there's so much improvement going on in so many places across the organisation. It's fantastic to see. And of course, at our level, we're just seeing, you know, a small number of those key things that we've set as being the overall trust priorities, rather than all the things that are happening in divisions and all the things that are happening within the teams. And I think that's okay. You know, we know where the information is, we know where to go to see it. You see it when you go out to teams and watch their huddles and see what they're working on. So sometimes it feels uncomfortable not having that data to hand. But equally, I think it's okay feeling uncomfortable about it, because I have enough assurance that that work is going on successfully and delivering value for our patients and our staff.
David, Naomi, thank you very much indeed. Clearly, this is an ongoing process, and I support absolutely the need to press on. And I think the trust overall philosophy of life is that about, you know, whether before we had QI, I think was about understanding the problems, putting them right, move on to the next problem, move on, a sort of steady incremental thing, which has done us very well. And this formalizes it and makes it more powerful. So I think it's great. I think in terms of your proposals here, I think maybe offline, David, you can just come up with some ideas. I think you've heard some support about induction for new members of the board, so that's great news. Just come up with some ideas, and perhaps offline we can just decide which ones we feel are the top priorities. Is that all right?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Martin.
David, thank you very much indeed. I think we now move on to the executive report, which I think probably is all waiting for legislation to go through before we can really make much of it.
Yeah, I think a little bit, Martin, although you can start to see the direction of travel, can't you? So after these papers were produced, the exec report, the Health and Care Bill had a second reading. So it's not legislation, it still can be amended, but you've got a flavour of where that was at. The incoming Health Secretary wanted to delay the reading, but understanding that number 10 was keen to press on with this predecessor's kind of work. And what you have in the executive report, I guess, is NHS England's kind of response to that bill about how they're going to organise themselves. So you've got the legislation sort of coming down, and then in terms of policy, NHS England have produced the integrated care systems design framework, anticipating kind of, you know, what the bill's going to say to sort of get us ready. And you've got the system oversight framework. It's fair to say, Martin, I mean, reading these things, you can definitely see the underlying philosophy and approach and the kind of move toward integrated care. But at the same time, there has to be a concern about the point that David made, really, these multiple power centres and everything else. And quite you could get lost in the complexity of the architecture and forget the original meaning, intention of kind of integrated care. And I think that is quite a risk. And so I think David's point was a very pertinent one, actually, which is how do we avoid that? So some of the power centres from the original legislation from 2012 still remain. So health and wellbeing boards, which have a statutory function in each of the 6 local authorities, we work very closely with them, and they have a statutory responsibility to publish a plan and produce work. So our children's services, for example, are involved in work in all 6 local authorities. The ICSs will be working on those, and so on and so forth. So I think the challenge for us will be, as this moves forward, a little bit like David expressed, really, how do we really have the maximum impact for our population and avoid some of the some of the potential downsides of what could be quite meeting heavy, particularly we sit in 2 ICSs. In relation to the boundary issue, my understanding is the decision is due this week now. It was due originally week commencing the 5th of July, and for obvious reasons with the change in Secretary of State, it did get deferred. But that was the latest information we know, Martin. So a couple of papers set out. You may have some questions about them, which we may not be able to answer because in a sense we're reporting other people's kind of work, but we'll do our very best to do so.
Any questions that Julian can answer? I mean, I think, oh, Chris, sorry.
Yeah, just reporting that I had a one-to-one with Andrew Lloyd last week. He seemed jolly chipper, I thought. I don't know what that means, but he seemed a little more optimistic than he had been in the past. And I think for me, one of the bigger problems that we're going to have is with the, should we say, truncated timeline, because if they really are going to make this happen from April 1 next year, and these ICSs, which currently don't exist, are going to be dictating priorities and resources, then a hell of a lot has got to happen for us not to get, into the old sort of days of, all the money going to Oxford, Radcliffe, and everything else can take the crumbs off the table. So let's just hope that this thing isn't going to be passed until after the recess, and then there's a lot to do for the 1st of April. So.
Yeah, going back to Julian's point, I mean, there's always a difficulty in these things, isn't there? If you're too prescriptive about how the system's going to be run, everyone complains it's too rigid. They're taking a slightly different view, which seems to be allowing local areas to do almost what they like within reason. And the danger of that, as Julian says, you get thousands of sort of power centres and everyone's fighting their own battles, which isn't helpful either. So it's going to be quite a subtle job, I think, to steer away through this. I mean, at the ICS level, I'm hoping that once that gets resolved in terms of geography, that we'll be able to provide influence to that to help get some top-down filtering of the big issues to meet David Townsend's concerns. But at the local level, we just got to get on and do the right thing with our partners, haven't we, to deliver an ever better service to our patients. I think we can get all swept up in the politics, but maybe at the end of the day, that isn't going to help too much. So keep it practical, keep it focused on delivering the right outcomes, and keep it sensible in terms of evidence, so that whenever people are making decisions, we have evidence that this is the right thing to do, or the best thing to do, as it were. But it'd be very interesting to see what happens. And the dates, Julian, if we're thinking we're getting an answer, someone, Chris, could I just turn your mic off?
Sure.
I think July, later this month, then, Julian, you're saying you think it'll go through?
ICS boundaries, Martin, did you say? Yeah. So my understanding was that we've got is it sometime this week we would hear about the ICS boundaries. Originally, it was week commencing the 5th of July, but obviously it's movable. But it is time sensitive for the reasons Chris said, because if the Frimley and other systems kind of review of boundaries has obviously put things on hold. So appointments to other ICSs like Bob and everything else have to be put on hold until they see the outcome. So there is some time sensitivity and pressure around the boundary issue. So I do expect us to know in July, yeah.
But there's also then the problem of, although not the issue of appointing the chairs of the ICSs.
Correct.
That's going to take some time. I don't know how long, but it'll take some time. So it'll be a bit of a hiatus before we actually get down to doing real business, I guess.
There's that potential, Martin, yeah.
Okay, well, I think we've got a complicated 6 months or so to come. Anything else on Julian's report? No? Thank you very much, Julian. Can we move on to the performance, the finance report, Paul?
Okay, thank you, Martin.
You're in darkness, Paul. Is that because you can't afford the shilling for the meter, or is that
a frugal accountant, obviously? Yeah. So fair to say that we're still navigating some fairly complex financial regimes for the first half of this year. The board report for month 2, it's worth highlighting that this reflects the final plan that was submitted to NHSE on the 22nd of June, and that was plan that was agreed across Bob with all system partners. The key change to note for the board is the additional elective recovery income that we've built into the plan. And just to remind board members, the Elective Recovery Fund this year is nationally set aside funding for activity that systems generate over and above agreed prescribed thresholds relating to 1920 activity. And that's 70% of 1920 activity in April, rising to 85% activity in July. Fair to say that the guidance on this is changing, so we got a revision earlier this week notifying us that the thresholds for Q2 had increased from 85% to 95%, and that's predicated on the level of activity that the NHS has done in April and May, and probably linked heavily to the cost of this initiative compared to what was originally estimated. So the NHS is delivering more activity in the first couple of months than was originally anticipated. So this scheme is costing the NHS more, hence the increase in the threshold. So to qualify for ERF funding, 2 conditions: the system has to deliver over and above those thresholds, and then the system needs to pass a gateway review with NHSE, which covers a range of criteria, including waiting list management information, health inequalities, outpatient transformation, and system-led recovery, amongst others. So based on the initial estimates of activity that the system is going to do in H1, we've increased, and the amount of that income that we're expected to receive, the plan's been increased to recognise 3.4 million of elective recovery funding, with an agreement that we will use this to cover the cost, where we've agreed with services they can invest to bring waiting lists down, but also to cover any additional revenue costs that we incur as a result of the adaptations we made to the capital plan to force the capital plan within envelope for the system. So those are the key changes on the plan. In terms of performance to month 2, Trust's made a solid start. So we've got a surplus of £1 million after the first 2 months, which is 600,000 better than we planned. And that surplus has been driven primarily because our workforce isn't as high as what we'd originally anticipated it to be. So recruitment is slower, and that's both in terms of recruitment into commissioner investments as well as underlying recruitment into other services that was planned. And also the marginal costs relating to COVID response are lower than what we expected, and obviously we've been given a fixed level of funding for the first 6 months to cover those costs. Those benefits are offsetting an increase in out of area placement costs, which spiked in May, but are falling back in June, and will come in next month's report. In terms of cash, we're obviously still holding a healthy cash balance off the back of the additional funding that we received last year. So cash is 39.7 million. And in terms of capital, as indicated, we've now managed to agree collectively across Bob a capital programme that's in line with the allocation that we were given, and that's included in the paper. And given the delays in agreeing that plan, I think that's caused some delay to spend, and we're 600,000 behind where we initially forecasted to be, but with spend expected to increase over the coming months. Looking ahead, we expect to bring an initial forecast to the Finance Committee in August. I think it's fair to say that we will be potentially indicating that we're going to perform better than this forecast plan. I think 2 factors on that. Probably one is the continued challenge around workforce, but also elective recovery funding indications are that the activity delivered is going to be in excess of what was originally put in the plans, so we may see additional benefit from that. So happy to take any questions, Martin.
I think Chris has got a hand up.
Thanks, Martin. Paul, just a couple of questions. So the comment on page 273 about, in addition, that there being 2 million of spend outside the control total, is that still correct, or are you saying that now effectively our control total allows everything to be within the budget allocated?
The 2 million capital expenditure that's outside of control total will remain outside of control total, Chris. So that's predominantly the PFI related spend, which isn't included within the centre's capital allocation calculation.
And are we, I suppose, so if you haven't got a capital allocation to cover that, are we still figuring on covering that by, if you like, revenue to capital transfers, or what are we, how are we funding that then?
So the 2 million that's outside of the sort of the capital allocation will be funded by internal cash. So the capital allocation that when we talk about the control total, there's no funds flowing to us. It's just effectively a spend target that that the ICS can't exceed, so that the whole of our capital programme, with the exception of I think a small element that's PDC funded, will all be funded from our internal cash.
So we haven't. So the nub of my question is we haven't got, if you like, a debit in the I&E account for 2 million to effectively cover that cost, which we could, should we say, go back to and re-examine the accounting treatment thereof. That's not the way that this is being done.
There is so having reviewed the capital expenditure plan, there has been some reclassification of expenditure into revenue, and that's due to be funded through the Erf funding. So there's no bottom line pressure to the organisation.
Right. Okay. And that was my other question, because clearly, if in order to fund the capex, we're having to assume that the ERF is going to, should we say, cover a multitude of these things. There's always a difficulty when you, should we say, have to predict the resources you're going to need ahead of having the certainty around the income, and then even hiring the people that you think will allow you to do that additional amount of activity. So, how are you going to sort of, should we say, keep the circle squared, that the amount of income that you're counting on, is going to cover the resources you can put in place and release enough to cover the revenue to capital or capital to revenue adjustments that you're having to make?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've got we're looking to sort of increase the forecasting capability on this, and we're working with the ICS to put a process in place around the assurance around the Erf funding. So we're looking at the activity levels on a monthly basis to give us an estimate of what that income is going to be, so that we've got some certainty over it, rather than waiting retrospectively for funding to flow through from the centre. But
we're going effectively at risk to recruit the people that we need to produce and the costs that we need in order to deliver that activity, which is, what other choice have we got? But presumably that's the assumption.
That is the assumption, but I think it's given where we're heading, I don't think it's going to be materialise as a financial risk, Chris.
Okay, that's fine. And the fact that there are no variances on either capex or rather on cash flow or balance sheet, presumably is rather more of a technical decision, or rather a technical thing, rather than it is the exceptional quality of your forecasting.
It's a technicality around the timing of submitting the plan at the end of June. So as part of the forecast, we're going to pick up the cash and balance sheet forecast, and we'll put revised versions into future reports.
Thank you.
Yeah, Naomi and then Julian.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Chris, because you picked up on a question I was going to ask. So, my question, and I intended to get my head around this yesterday by going and looking, so forgive me, and I never got round to it, Paul, which was the 1H run rate for our total non-pay, which is forecast at 38.1 million. how does that compare to 1H of last year? And do we expect that run rate to continue into 2H this year?
So the run rate this year in terms of non-pay has increased due to the fact that we have got some additional expenditure that we're going to incur from the effectively reclassification of capital. So that will increase. We're also probably seeing some costs that may have been classified as COVID previously into our non-pay position, because obviously that trend graph that you can see in the report excludes all of associated COVID costs. In terms of what's going to run through into H2, I would it's difficult to say, because I think what we'll see is probably a continuation of the level that we're seeing exiting kind of August, September time, but probably with an efficiency factor needing to be built in, which I'm expecting will come through into H2.
Okay, and my other question was about the implications of a surplus. So you know, we emphasise, don't we, or have emphasised historically, the importance of breaking even or having a very small deficit. But it strikes me as a reasonable prediction that we might end up with a material surplus this year. So my question is, so what if that happened?
My sense is what we would want to do is try to maximise some of that surplus that we're forecasting into this year. So whether that's looking with system partners in terms of how that can be invested non-recurrently, so that we don't end up reporting a significant surplus. I think the ERF presents a challenge for us, because it's a nationally mandated mechanism by which we potentially are going to see significant additional revenues, and we're not in a similar position to the acutes where we're investing significantly to generate that. We've kept a relatively consistent level of activity. So I think it's going to be as much about the management of that surplus position in terms of what we can do with it in year.
And I think that message is an important one for the board, because it's a different paradigm to one that we've been in, a financial paradigm to the one we've been in historically, and this created a different kind of tension for us. So and I'm not expressing heartburn, Paul, unless you are, but I just think, you know, it's an interesting one, isn't it, and one that we will monitor through FIP. So that's fine. Yeah,
it's not a problem that we've come across on too many occasions previously.
Thank you.
Julian.
Yeah, the point follows on nicely from that. I probably wasn't going to use the word paradigm, but I think it was the right thing, which is, traditionally the NHS, not just us, it's been revenue in the last few years. It's been an issue, and particularly around here, a lot of foundation trusts have had sufficient on the whole capital cash to be able to do the things they wanted to do, and have been able to do that relatively unfettered, within the rules of the plan. I do think there is a risk, Martin, around the capital, and I think Chris alluded to the point about why it hasn't been an issue for us, because the treatment of PFIs is different. We've still got quite a lot of improvement work to do. The CQC are really clear, the publishing of the paper, about they expect to see continuous improvement in environments in acute psychiatric settings. And obviously that involves significant capital investment. It is purely fortunate for us, we have a psychiatric hospital, unlike, say, for example, Oxford, which they own, is not a PFI, whereas that isn't counting to our capital limit. If it was, I think we'd be in a bind at the moment in terms of that allocation. And so I just think at the moment, I've had assurance from the team that the capital spend that we've got this year doesn't present us with any problems because of the treatment of Prospect Park. That may be not the same every year, so it's something we'll need to pay particular attention to. And there's been a lot of negotiation. If the ICS gets, I don't know, a £75 million envelope that it has to stick into with Treasury limits, inevitably you can see in coming years that there will be pressure on that. There might be a trust that literally has to spend 20, 25, 30 million of that simply to keep themselves safe or to do something. The treatment of it is also unusual. So, for example, Oxford University Hospitals is building equipment in Swindon, a cancer radiotherapy stuff, and that counts towards Bob ICS money, even though the beneficiaries will be in Wiltshire. So I think the capital and the implications for safety and quality will be something we'll need to keep an eye on and have assurance on that we're able to do everything we need to do, or we have appropriate mitigation in place.
I agree. And I had to say, I'm not all that optimistic about the long-term running costs either. I suspect that there's going to be, once this pandemic bit has passed and the ICS has settled down, I suspect the world will go back to being quite difficult financially.
Yeah, I think you're right, Martin, but it's a difficult narrative, isn't it, Martin? If you're saying to people, we can't make that improvement, and then they say, well, I've read your board papers, you've got 30 odd million pounds in the bank, so I think we've also, as a board, got to be able to explain that without it sounding like it's somebody else's kind of fault, because that never sounds great. But we could be in a position, Martin, with the revenue where our bank balance is going up and we're spending less on capital. And I think that, we have to have a board explanation around that. I think it's really
absolutely, absolutely. Naomi, did you have a follow-up?
Sorry, just a very quick follow-up to just powerfully endorse what Julian has just said, and therefore, and this, Paul, this might be something that you and I want to look at a bit more deeply through FIP. It makes me wonder whether or not the capital plan that we have, which is outside the control total and heavily so big, material investment in PPH, is ambitious enough. So, because there is a balance, isn't there, between the capacity that we have to do all this work, and does it make sense? Because my thinking is that if we are in this kind of 1 year unique set of circumstances where we have an opportunity to do this, then let's max it out. But at the same time, we've got to ensure that we create a plan that is actually achievable.
Paul, did you want to respond just before I invite Chris?
No, completely agreeing with Naomi.
Chris,
just a very quick one. Having attended an ICS governance thing last week with national colleagues and people from the department, an example was given to sort of pick up on what Julian was saying about, should we say, investment in one ICS area, or rather by trust in one ICS area affecting patient benefit in another. And the example that was given was London Ambulance, which effectively has a lead ICS organisation. And the conversation that they are starting to have will be perhaps, if you like, capital transfers, that to say that, if something in one particular ICS has to make an investment for the benefit of a much broader system for an ICS, then some form of, should we say, capital transfer to stop perverse incentives is something that they're definitely looking at.
Okay.
Sorry, Mike. On that, we should recognise that we're probably in a similar position in the sense that, from Bob's perspective, because we straddle the Frimley ICS, elements of our capital investment programme, Bob will see as benefiting the Frimley ICS as well.
There was no one giving any commitments. All I would say is watch this space over a period of time. They are clearly aware that that the rules as set out are potentially perverse. So, because as you know, I've been long since worried about East Berkshire getting any say-so in its community hospital investment, because why would someone in Abingdon give a monkeys about the state of facilities in Slough? And I think they're aware that that an element of pragmatism is required over that.
Maybe it's an argument, Chris, for having ICSs with a wider footprint. I don't know. Anyway, complex stuff. Paul, thanks so much. Could we move on to the performance report?
Yeah, happy to. So I think just want to highlight a few things.
Questions?
Yep, happy with that.
Any questions on the performance report? No. I think there was one issue to do with. I think it was. Oh, sorry, I can't read the page there. Forgive me, I'll just be with you in a minute. I think it was about harm. Were
you perhaps thinking about falls?
It was one where it suddenly went up and then came down again. I can't find the blinking thing.
Out of area placements, Martin.
Was it suddenly?
Maybe.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, no, there was an out of area. You're quite right. Which seemed a bit odd. I couldn't. Yes, it's on page 279. Where clearly we know, with COVID pressures, out of area placements have been very high. And then it comes back to green, but the latest one is 607 for May, and it's still green. David, can you just, I think it's David Townsend, can you just help me on that?
Yeah, I think the reason it's come down is because it's a cumulative figure, Martin. So we reset the clock at the beginning of April 21. So the 1045 is where we ended up with the number of days by the end of last year, and the 180 was the number that we had for April, and that's gone up to 607 for May.
Okay, all right. Any other questions for? Oh, Naomi, sorry, put your hand up.
I had the same question as you, Martin. And this might be something I need to follow up outside, but I don't feel conversant, if that's the right word, with how we measure out of area placements. I find the data a bit confusing. But yeah, let's take that one offline.
I think I share your confusion.
We can do an update at the next FIP if you want, Naomi. I mean, this measurement is one that we report through to NHS England. So when they introduced the target a few years ago around getting to zero, they had a particular way that needed to be reported. So we had to adjust the reporting to match that. But we can absolutely do a short paper just to explain that and give an update, more detailed update on the work we're doing around it.
Helpful. Thank you, David.
Okay, any other questions on this? Okay, thanks so much. Vision metrics, Paul, your last starring piece.
Thank you. So again, happy to take any questions. I'll assume it's read. There's obviously very few movements from the report that came a few months ago.
My observation, well, one is I think it's really helpful to have this broader view, because you do see things that are obscured when you look at the detail, and I assume not for now, but at some point when the system operating framework, or whatever it's called, for measuring system performance settles down, and we might want to sort of understand how this fits in with some of those wider measures of the performance of the system as opposed to the performance of the trust. I'm not advocating some great change, but I think we'll need to reflect on that as and when it happens. Any other questions? Okay. COVID recovery plan, Alex?
Hi. So yeah, this is really an assurance piece. We're closing the specific programme for recovery, and that's transitioning to the oversight with David and his team in terms of the operations directorate. We have the heat map that we've shown you a draft of, and this will be about triangulating from operational heat map to work on the strategy to the work on the key quality concerns as they relate to recovery and wait lists as we go through, and really just to make that note how we're managing recovery now, transitioning to business as usual.
Just for the record, are there any areas where you're worried about residual issues in recovery?
Not specific concerns. We know where we've got waiting list pressure and where we have the focus, and Debbie is triangulating that around quality concerns. So I think we've got good visibility. And David, in terms of the heat map, the operations heat map, might suggest giving view of that in FIP in due course.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. That'd be good. Any questions for Alex? Okay, thanks so much, Alex. Audit committee meeting, Chris, anything to say?
Well, other than it was the normal May event for reviewing and scrutinising the annual accounts, the audit process, and giving approvals on behalf of the board, and that all went through as normal. The internal audit section was slightly unusual. Normally we would have done that at the April meeting, but it wasn't ready at the time, so we did it at the May meeting. So this was the internal audit strategy and 21-22 plan, and other than a few, should we say, questions and tweaks around reviewing waiting lists, and perhaps aligning the internal audit plan to be rather more in line with our 3-year strategy rather than necessarily entirely standalone. That all happened. The usual well done. So, and this year, I mean, every year they're genuine, but this year, given the circumstances, very well done to everybody, especially as this was almost completely remotely handled, and the reports are, should we say, not going to embarrass us when they hit the public. And finally, just to say that I caught wind of the recruitment of Becky Clegg as Paul's new a former protege of mine as the person who's going to cover Paul's position, and that is an excellent hire, and really gives me a significant amount of assurance that in all of the sort of movement around, that we're going to have the quality of financial management that Naomi and the team in finance and performance is going to need.
Thank you very much, Chris. Any comments for Chris? Okay, Council of Governors update. Just to say we welcome new governors following the recent elections, and we're undertaking induction at the moment. And of course, governors are engaged in the process for recruiting and appointing the new NED to take over from Chris at the end of his term in the autumn. That's on the 19th of this month. Any other business? Okay. I was going to suggest.
Sorry, Martin. Forgive me again. What's the sort of time frame for that replacement of Chris? I should know. Is it September? Is it?
It's a September time. Yeah, I think the actual appointment, but doing the recruitment now. So the interview's on the 19th, but it'll be, Julie will have the exact date, I'm sure, Chris. But it's September, I think.
Yeah. So I go at the 30th of September, and I think the idea is that whoever is appointed is able to shadow me at the September meeting, so that there's at least a degree of handover in terms of how we, obviously for that person to decide how they want to do things, but at least it's, that person to see exactly us in action.
Okay. Any other business? Okay. I suggest that just before we do the final resolution on timing, it's 12:30 now. I suggest we take a 10-minute break. We've got the formal one, and then we can have a chance for a bit of lunch after that before we start the EDI session in the afternoon. Otherwise, we'll be running on through the whole day. Is that okay with everyone? So we'll now adopt our normal resolution to exclude the press and public from the remainder of the meeting due to the confidential nature of the business. Thank you very much. So 10 minutes.